Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So this is a video you guys voted for on my Twitter and Facebook page. And so here I am delivering you guys what you want to see, and I feel like a lot of people want to see because it is just an interesting topic. So in this video, I'll be listing out what I believe to be are the hardest mid lane champions. Now when I say hardest champion, what exactly does that really mean? Well, the things I'm referring to are, for instance, maybe hard mechanics, require many games to actually understand and play the champion well. The champion has many options or different ways to approach a fight or scenario, because the more options there are, sure, that's a good thing, but it also means that there's more than one way to fail or mess up. It's about understanding which option is the best. And ultimately, champions that are just hard to master have a very deep learning curve and a very in-depth type of kit. Now do not confuse this with champions maybe like Ryze or Diana that are definitely hard to pick up, but they're not very hard to master, because ultimately their kit is more or less straightforward and you will be approaching many scenarios in many of the same ways. So those are the basis I'll be using to judge these champions that I put on this list. Now keep in mind, again, this is a mix of my opinions and other people I have asked that are very high elo players. And remember to hit that like button if you end up enjoying this video or agreeing with it. But without further ado, let's go right into the number 5 spot. So starting things off is going to be Orianna. Now at first glance, you might be wondering why exactly is she on this list, and I agree, she is fairly simple to just pick up and play, but she has a very deep kit that will take a lot of practice to truly master and utilize to its full potential. So for instance, she has many things that she has to keep track of, mainly her ball. Now whether that's keeping track of where the ball is to begin with, whether or not you should be using the ball for the move speed and utility, or the damage or the shield for yourself or an ally, or where you should put it to give vision, or where it should just overall be within a team fight, whether it's from your Q or the E on an ally, in order to utilize your ultimate to its full potential as well. Many things to think about that you only have a few seconds to do while a team fight or just a general fight is happening, and you have to make the correct decision while having many options. It is also very important to know what is the max range of her ball that is away from Orianna. So for instance, if you have it on an ally that walks too far away from you, the ball will disappear from that ally and go back onto you instantly, so misusing your ultimate in that kind of scenario can be very bad. Her passive buffs her auto attack damage, which is really nice, but it also means that you have to more or less take advantage of this whenever possible. So best case scenario, in between each spellcast, maybe in the laning phase, you want to throw in an auto attack as well to further increase the total damage you're doing, which overall adds more depth to the kit. So Orianna is a great start to this list. I mean, at first sight, she seems like a fairly simple champion, but when you really look at everything that she can do and everything her kit offers, you see the depth and potential within it. Forcing you to multitask constantly and also having no escapes in her kit adds to the depth and difficulty as well. However, the simple parts of her kit is the fact that she does have fairly low cooldowns, maybe on her Q, her W, and even her E, to the point where if you maybe mess up your Q, well, you can throw it back again in a few seconds. She doesn't really have a lot of skill shots except for her Q and her ultimate technically, and she has a natural control of the lane and team fight, so she is a control mage, and it does make things a little bit easier in the greater scheme of things, but again, the depth and the difficulty is still very much there. Now let's move on to the number 4 spot, where I feel like this is somewhat of a personal opinion, but a lot of people I have asked that are high-low mid lane players have also agreed that she is fairly difficult. So in my opinion, one of the things that makes Anivia a difficult champion is because of just how unique she really is. A lot of other mid lane champions, maybe like Orianna and Lulu, or something like LeBlanc and Zed, or things like that, you can transition your knowledge and mechanics from champion A, so maybe Orianna, to champion B, so in that case Lulu. However, I don't feel like that's the case with Anivia, because there's no real champion that you can be like, okay, I'm good at this champion, so that must mean that I should be a very good Anivia player, because she is just so different. And because of that, she does require a lot of time invested into this champion to really utilize her to her full potential. Now, I don't feel like Anivia is the champion with the most options in her kit, though the options that she still does have, such as when to throw out your Q, when to activate the second part of Q, when to throw out your W, or have your ultimate placed on the ground are very crucial and important. More so with her W, because this ability has to be the defining ability of Anivia. It's definitely a make or break type thing, and if you place down a fantastic wall, well, you're gonna be getting a lot of bonuses from that for your team. But on the flip side, it is very easy to mess up and in turn screw your team over. But on top of the mechanics, Anivia as a champion herself has a horrible auto attack animation, very difficult to play pre-6 in the laning phase because landing your Q is next to impossible against a player that actually knows what they're doing. She is a very slow and immobile champion that has no escapes, so positioning is very important, and it doesn't really help with the fact that she is a mid-range caster, not really having a whole lot of poke, something like maybe a Ziggs, a Lux, a Xerath, so you have to pick and choose your fights carefully. Also, going into the advanced types of techniques you can do with Anivia, combining your Q as it's flying with the W to force them to be inside the Q as it hits on them is very difficult, but it is extremely effective. Overall, I feel like everyone should agree that Anivia is not only very unique, but she does take a lot of practice to really play her to her full potential and just play her effectively. And to truly understand the depth to her kit and just how to carry with such a control mage champion that is again very unique. However, the easy things about Anivia is, well, she does have among the best passives in the game where you don't really have to do anything except for look at the screen and cross your fingers. Essentially, you get a second try. Her wall, even though it has a lot of depth in terms of how you actually place it down, the ability itself is not that hard in terms of actually placing it down. Her Q is counted as 2 spells, which is fantastic, and she has amazing wave clear with her ultimate that is also fairly easy to do. Overall, I think a very well-deserved number 4 spot. Alright, let's move into the top 3 most difficult champions in the mid lane as of right now. And starting things off are going to be 2 champions that I decided to group together, Zed and Yasuo. So I'm sure this is a very touchy subject for many players because for whatever reason, a lot of players look at champions like Zed and Yasuo as simple, brain dead, absolutely snowbally, stompy champions that require next to no skill to play. Now, if you're a plat player smurfing in silver and you're destroying everyone with these champions, yes, that is literally what these champions are made to do. They are made to snowball and they are made to continue that snowball and just overall stomp a game. However, if the people you are facing are your skill level, if not higher, it is much more difficult to get to that point where you are snowballing and overall are just wrecking everyone's face. Now, of course, it is still very possible, but again, getting to that stage is much more difficult. But you have to remember, these champions are designed to snowball and continue that snowball and become stronger and stronger and stronger, unless of course you make big mistakes. But on the flip side, if you do not snowball in your lane or maybe in the early game, then you are actually fairly useless because not only are you not bringing in the damage needed, you are not assassinating anyone that you need to, nor are you really bringing any good CC. Now sure, Yasuo's knockups are fantastic when it comes to CC, but again, a mage that offers a lot of other CC, maybe like Xerath, Lulu, Orianna, even Anivia, are just overall better. Now sure, Yasuo and Zed are champions you can pick up and do fairly well with just in a few games, but when it comes to mastering a champion or mastering these 2 champions specifically, it is truly very difficult because these champions just have such a deep kit. They are very mechanically intensive champions and there's many ways you can approach a situation like Orianna, except these guys have even more ways. Again, that's a double-edged sword. It's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because the more ways you can approach a situation, the more ways you can fail and mess up, on top of truly having to realize which of the several ways are the best ways. Other than that, however, Yasuo's laning phase is very hard because there's a lot of champions that can abuse him and you have to utilize his E ability nearly perfectly and his W in order to actually come out of the lane ahead. And then on the contrary, we have Zed, who does have a fairly strong laning phase. However, his late game is not super strong just because of how many counters there are to his ultimate and overall his playstyle. And since Zed doesn't really bring any form of CC, well, you have to be at least somewhat strong in order to be effective for your team, or you are going to be very useless. As assassins in both melee champions, they're very vulnerable to CC and just overall getting locked down, which is why, for instance, for Yasuo, perfect W reaction timing is crucial, which is just something that many people cannot do just because they do not have those reactions. And a similar thing to Zed when it comes to swapping shadows fast enough and properly, again in order to avoid abilities, to avoid CC, and make the outplays happen. Team fighting with these guys are also very difficult because they're just really hard champions to utilize properly within a team fight. And I mean, truly these champions are just very difficult and much harder than everyone makes them out to be. Now the easy things about these champions is yes, they will stomp lower skill level players than yourself or than the person that was facing them. And yes, Yasuo's Windwall can block virtually any skill shot, and Zed does have fantastic mobility. Next, let's finally move into the number 2 spot, and I have to say the number 2 spot and the number 1 spot were fairly close, but by now I'm sure most of you can guess who I put in the number 1 spot. But regardless, in the number 2 spot we have Cassiopeia, a champion I personally haven't seen in quite a while, but without question a very difficult champion to play that requires very precise mechanics. Not a champion that has a whole lot of options in her kit in terms of how you can approach a situation, but once you are in a situation, the way you handle it is very reliant on just how well you can manage your champion. To me and to many others, she is essentially an ADC turned into a mage, because about halfway through the game, your E ability pretty much becomes your auto attack. However, you can't really use your auto attack, or I guess in this case your E ability, without having poison on the target, so that's another layer of something you have to keep track of. So not only do you have to position very carefully while also kite your opponents while spamming your E while keeping the Q poison on them constantly and reapplying it when it goes back off. But this whole time you have to make sure no one is jumping on you because you have no escapes. You have to be ready for your ultimate for the proper scenario, because it is a fairly slow ultimate with the cast time, but it is absolutely game changing. You also have to make sure your mana is up to par and you don't run out of mana halfway through a fight. You have to make sure you don't accidentally use your E on a target or the target you're attacking without the poison on them if it ran out maybe just a split second ago. And you still have to make sure you're able to throw in your W in the middle of the rotation of your Q, E, and maybe even your ultimate to further in the damage and the slow as well, so that it helps you kite your opponents even further. So I hope after my blabbling just now you got a decent idea of just how mechanically intensive and difficult this champion really is. Oh yeah, and by the way, her auto attack animation is also quite horrible, much like Anivia, though not as bad. But again, luckily for her, it essentially gets replaced later on in the game. Now the easy things about Cassiopeia is that her kit just naturally has a lot of damage, her W gives vision and is AoE, so it's not that difficult to land. Her ultimate, if you hit the opponents while they're facing away from you, will still at least do the damage and will still give you the slow, which is quite generous of it. And she gets a ridiculous amount of damage for free thanks to her passive. And finally, the number 1 spot, without much surprise, should without question be given to Azir. The Emperor of Shurima has made a name for himself ever since he has come out because of the sheer amount of potential and difficulty he has. He's very similar to Cassiopeia in the number 2 spot in the sense that they're both champions as if an ADC was turned into a mage, since Azir's main damage comes from essentially his auto attacks that happen to work with his soldiers. So kiting, attack move, and all that good stuff is required and is very difficult to do, mind you, in order to play Azir to his potential. Now one really cool thing about Azir that makes him so difficult is that you almost need to know how to play 3 different types of roles in order to play Azir properly. You need to be able to play him as an actual mage zoner with of course his soldiers being able to attack from range. You have to know how to play him as an initiator so you can insect people at the right times and make plays for your team. And you need the mechanics of an ADC in order to, again, like I said, orb walk and attack move and all of that stuff. Last hitting with his W in the first few levels takes a lot of practice because it's very easy to miss minions with his soldiers. Like many of the other champions I've mentioned so far and also discussed, he has so many options in his kit and how he can approach a situation that not only knowing how to approach it and actually utilizing the mechanics to make it happen, but knowing which of the options is the best is not easy. Spacing your soldiers between Azir himself is very crucial because if you put him too far and then someone jumps on you, it can make things very awkward, or vice versa. If the soldiers are too close to you, then you can't really harass your opponent. The insect play, even though it has been made a little bit easier, is still fairly difficult and requires not only a lot of balls to actually do, because if you mess up, then well, you're probably just gonna die, but actually doing it correctly and sending a good amount of people on the enemy team back to your team without making it bad for your team and putting them in a bad situation is also something you have to know and understand. Overall, I think we can all agree Azir Azir has to be among, if not the most difficult champion in mid lane and maybe even League of Legends in general. Now very quickly before the video ends and without spending too much time, a couple of honorable mentions. I want to quickly point out Twisted Fate and LeBlanc because again these are champions I feel like some people may have expected to see but did not. So for Twisted Fate, I don't think he's a very mechanically intensive champion because his kit is fairly straightforward. However, when it comes to what his ultimate offers, it does make him fairly difficult because it forces you to always have to look at the minimap and have constant map awareness, which is something a lot of people really lack in. And then on the other hand, we have LeBlanc, very similar to Zed. I didn't include her because I didn't want to have 3 champions in a single spot together, and I didn't want to make room for her in this list as well because there were other champions that I just wanted to talk about. But she is a very mechanically intensive champion because she has so many options in her kit, and she is fairly difficult to carry a game with. However, when it comes to just flat out picking her up and having success with her, it is very possible with LeBlanc. She's fairly easy to pick up and play, but she's very difficult when it comes to mastering. Alright guys, that is it for this video of the top 5 hardest mid laners in my personal opinion and asking other players. If you did enjoy this video, found it informative, found it entertaining, or agreed with this list to some extent, please definitely hit the like button to show your support as it does help me quite a bit. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, check out my other top 5 lists and my other videos as well. I hope you'll enjoy them too, and I'll see you for the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.